The popular bread tuber Xanderhal has produced a video arguing that the United States should remain in the long war it started in the early 2000s in Afghanistan. His argument is essentially that when America intervened in 2001, despite all of the harm it did, it really implemented a democratic government in the country. Pulling out would supposedly allow the Taliban to retake control, and so, even though the US essentially created the Taliban, it must remain in the region to take care of the problem it created.
There are good reasons for us to stay there. Very good reasons. One of the things that we did in the almost 20 years we've been in Afghanistan, is influence a democratic government in the country and establish many progressive changes, such as women being allowed to work, women being allowed to go to school, and even women being allowed to own their own businesses. Very, very good. I like democracy. And every lefty here should like democracy, even if we don't like American imperialism. But that doesn't answer the question. Why haven't the Taliban been dealt with yet? Well, take a look at this geography. Look at that. It is very, very hard to fight the Taliban, even with all of our forces and all of our technology. The Taliban have the geography on their side. They have stealth and the element of surprise on their side. It's a very similar situation to the Vietnam War, a war that America lost. We pulled out. We didn't win the war with Vietnam. The Viet Cong kicked our asses. We lost an insane amount of troops, American troops in Vietnam, to people who are using traps and the environment to their advantage. And a very similar thing is happening with the Taliban in Afghanistan. They still have a lot of influence across the country, and there's still a very big danger to the good things that America has helped do in the country. Now, America wants to leave. Many of you may be wondering, well, why is that a bad thing? Well, the Taliban are so bad that even the people of Afghanistan don't want America leaving if it means the Taliban retake control. And the Taliban have said that they will execute any citizens of Afghanistan that helped America, and they will reenact any terrible policy that used to be in place before America helped liberate the country, most of the country, of the Taliban's control. If we look at the polling data, 73% of Afghan people that were surveyed say that they would not like if the US accepted a peace deal with the Taliban that did not keep women's rights to work outside of the home, as well as 85% that said they don't want a peace deal if women and girls are no longer able to go to school. The vast majority of the people in Afghanistan do not want America leaving if it means the Taliban retake power and roll back all these positive things that have happened in the time since America occupied the country. But we have a problem. Do we want Afghanistan to be stuck in a perpetual war between American soldiers, the militias that are working with America, and the government of Afghanistan, against the Taliban? Do we want the more civilians to die? Do we want more of this to happen? Or do we want to just leave, clean our hands of the situation, and leave Afghanistan and its people to suffer under the rule of the Taliban? And it is suffering, by the way. The people of Afghanistan do not want the Taliban in power. It's a horrible situation. We're stuck between a rock and a hard place, and I don't know how we solve this problem. That's the big difference between this segment and most of my subjects, most subjects that I cover. Usually I have a solution to this problem, but today I don't. I don't know what we can do in this situation. All I know is that right now, leaving the country would result in the people of Afghanistan suffering. The Taliban was a problem of our own making. America gave the Taliban the weapons they have. And now we're fighting them while they're using those weapons. It was a problem we made, and I feel like a problem we're almost obligated to solve as well.
It is bizarre to see leftist content creators make the same arguments as the neoconservatives of the Reagan and Bush administrations. According to these arguments, the social destabilization in Afghanistan can be reduced to the conflict around the world between us, read US, the good guys, and them, the bad guys, whether those bad guys be the USSR or the Islamic fundamentalists who were effectively created by our ally in Saudi Arabia. The coalition occupation of Afghanistan proved this logic wrong, as did the Soviet invasion years prior. The conflicts in the region are far too complex and volatile to be reduced to good versus evil, much less for the Soviet Union or the United States to effectively control. Xanderhal is simply wrong when he states that the U.S. really implemented democratic government. In reality, the government we created was no more than an administration of corrupt warlords, for whom the police were the militia. The population naturally viewed the militia as its enemy. Local leaders tried to tell the coalition that the real problem was the administration it propped up. The coalition did not listen, and when the population started shooting at British forces for supporting the police, the British called them the Taliban and wiped them out with bombs.
Before they came to Helmand, the British had forced President Karzai to get rid of its governor. But they didn't realise that he had left behind him a completely corrupted society. And nothing was what it seemed. When the British went into towns like Sangin, they tried to support the police. But the police were really the armed militia for the sacked governor. To the locals, this meant that the Western troops were supporting their oppressors. So they started to attack the British.
Get inside! Shit, that's close, that one out the back there. It was. Right, mate, get under. See that them. Shit. You're overshooting on us.
Stay down, lads, stay down.
Hey, is that incoming, all right? Come in. Fucking incoming now.
The British thought that this must mean they were Taliban. So in response, they dropped giant bombs on them.
Fucking hell.
Did you get that, did you?
Yes, I did.
Fucking hell. Fucking hell. Holy shit.
But this then devastated the town centres, which made even more local people join in the attacks. Seeing their chance, the real ideological Taliban, who were now based in Pakistan, flooded back in, and they started attacking the British too. At the same time, the corrupt militias, who worked for the local government, also turned against the British. Faced by the chaos, the British still clung to their simple narrative of good and evil. They, the Western forces, were good, and all the different groups who were attacking them were Taliban and were bad. But this extraordinary simplification had terrible consequences, because if you were an Afghan and wanted to kill a rival, all you had to do was go to the British and tell them that he was a Taliban, and the British would obediently wipe him out. The British were being used. The terrible truth was that the British presence did not contain the war. It did the very opposite. It escalated it so much that it ran out of control. And the bodies, Afghan and British, piled up.
The dynamic was one of manipulation. They understood how we saw the conflict. They presented their local group conflict, their civil war between groups that had been going on for 35 years. They presented everything in that dynamic. So they came to us and said, those people over there are Taliban. And we went, okay, and we went off and dealt with them. But actually we were dealing with their previous enemies, so we were just creating more enemies for ourselves. And you ended up in a downward spiral where, because everyone was manipulating us, we ended up fighting everyone. And then in return, everyone who fought us immediately became Taliban. The way that we decided whether you were Taliban or not was whether you were firing at us.
The reality is that we can't control Afghanistan. Its social forces have always been too volatile for either the US or Soviet Union to accomplish this. More to the point, the United States can't control anything anymore. Much is still said of US dominance on the global level, but the effective hegemony the US enjoyed after World War II ended in the real world with the defeat in Vietnam that marked the world historic development of the inability of empires to exercise effective control over their subordinates. The US went into Afghanistan to intimidate the world into once again gifting it hegemony, and it didn't work. The new nuclear powers such as Iran and North Korea, states in the Middle East ambiguous toward Israel, and our allies in Western Europe and Japan were not convinced by our bravado. The long wars continued after the failure of all US objectives. Even if US hegemony could be used for good, and the mass slaughter of the forever wars in the Mideast shows us it cannot, US hegemony is over. Humpty Dumpty can't be put back together. The idiocy of bread tubers repeating neoconservative ideology isn't even useful idiocy, for it is useful to no one. If you enjoyed the video, you can check out my blog, Patreon, or PayPal in the description. So, yeah, see you next time.